All right, guys. So as you can, you're going to see my voice doesn't match that. I forgot I didn't have the microphone in. So we are in Pleasantville, New Jersey, at the Atlantic City Cemetery, and we are going to visit a mobster. Um, if you're familiar with Philly, South Philadelphia, Atlantic City, you know little Nicky Scarfo. Um, and I guess let's just get into it. So he was born Nicodemo Domenico Scarfo Jr. He was born March 8th, 1929, in Brooklyn, New York, to Philip and Catherine Scarfo, who immigrated to the U.S. from what region? The Calabria region of Italy. Um, and then once he got to around age 12, little Nicky moved to South Philly from Brooklyn. He worked as a day laborer as a child before eventually graduating high school in 1947. He quickly earned a badge for being a hothead and became an amateur boxer throughout Philly. In the early 1950s, Scarfo would become a bartender in South Philly at a bar owned by his uncle Nicky Buck, and then eventually joining his uncle Nicky in the mob as a soldier in the New York Bruno family. After a while, he was given the opportunity to marry the daughter of consigliere Joe Rugnetti, but Nicky, being arrogant, declined the offer, making Rugnetta feel just disrespected and embarrassed within the family. In 1963, Scarfo pleaded guilty to manslaughter. This one, it's a good one here. After a night out at a local diner, and they came in the diner and they sat down at a booth, and then a man came over and said, "Hey, you're in my spot." I had just gotten up to go say hi to somebody else. That became an argument. Um, Neither one of them were probably in their right minds. So what did little Nicky do? He stabbed him repeatedly in the neck and the face. What a nice guy, right? But somehow he spent just 6 months in prison. 6 months. After getting back from his prison stint, he was sent to Atlantic City by mob boss Angelo Bruno. This pissed off Nicky because he felt at the time Atlantic City was past its prime, past its heyday. There wasn't any casinos. It wasn't the best town in Jersey, and he felt so far away from the action in South Philly. Even though Atlantic City and South Philly is 45 minutes down the expressway. Once New Jersey finally legalized gambling in Atlantic City in 1976, this became his prime source of income. Nicky, being smart, realized if all these casinos were coming to town, they would need a lot of concrete. And there was only one company in town that did concrete work. This is when he made Scarf Inc., concrete company. So, as a typical mobster, he would use intimidation to get what he wanted and get people to sign with him to do the contract work. Then around 1976, he gave $12,500 to a judge, Judge Edwin Helfont, to get charges taken away or reduced for his Scarf Inc. co-owner, Nicky the Blade Virgilio. The judge either didn't tell anybody, or he just kept the money and just didn't do shit with it. This pissed off Nicky, and the Blade spent about 2 years in prison, and I guess just being anxious and ready for revenge. So 1978 came around, and Nick the Blade gets out of jail with one thing on his mind. He sat in a car outside the Flamingo Motel on Pacific Avenue, Atlantic City, that Judge Helfont co-owned, and watched him go inside with his wife to eat dinner. They went there on that particular night every night, 9 o'clock. He walked in with a ski mask on, went right up to the judge, put his arm around him, filled him with bullets, and just simply walked away. Then in 1979, Nicky Scarfo, along with his nephew Phil Leonetti, lured contractor Vincent Falcone to their condo. I believe it was in Ventnor. When Scarfo asked Falcone to make some drinks, Falcone turned away from the men and was shot in the back of the head twice by Phil Leonetti for talking shit about Scarfo and his company. Now, it's rumored to say that Scarfo walked up to him, looked him in the eyes, and said, "I love this shit. I love this shit." And they shot him again in the chest. They put the dude in the carpet, shoved him in the trunk of his own car, and left it in the parking lot. In 1980, mob boss Angelo Bruno was publicly assassinated while sitting in his car in New York City. Everybody is so familiar with this one. It's the one where he's sitting in his Cadillac and he's got his mouth wide open, by a gunman who just walked up behind him and shot him in the back of the head with a shotgun. The hit was ordered by Antonio Caponegro without consent from the other families in the mob. Unfortunately for him, for doing this on his own, he was found shot dozens of times in the trunk of his car with $100 bills up his ass and mouth as a sign of his own greed. Then in Philadelphia, Phil Testa became the new boss, and he made little Nicky his consigliere. Testa made Peter Casella his underboss. Being an underboss is not in the books for Casella. And in 1981, he ordered Frank Narducci Sr. To kill Testa. So Narducci went underneath Testa's front porch, packed it full of explosives, and then just went in the van across the street and waited for him to come home. As Testa put his key into the door, the bomb went off, throwing Testa straight through his front door and blowing the porch into pieces. That's when the real war began, I guess. And Scarfo seized the opportunity and became boss of the Philadelphia mob, making Sal Merlino his underboss. So, over the next decade, he would lead by violence and bouts of paranoia, extreme intimidation, either mentally or physically. After another stint in jail and constant murder, Scarfo tried to extort $1 million from a commercial developer who quickly turned and ran straight to the FBI. So between 1987 and 1989, he was convicted of conspiracy and racketeering. Little Nicky's son, Mark Scarfo, was being bullied and constantly bombarded by his father's trial and history, and he went over to Scarf Inc. to the office and hung himself. Eventually, he passed away, but I think he was on life support for some time, though. But eventually, little Nicky began his prison term, 30 years in Atlanta Federal Pen. And as he got older, was transferred to the Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina, where he eventually died in natural causes on January 13th, 2017. So, all that being said, little Nicky Scarfo was troubled for years, being a tiny guy, thinking people could walk all over him. And I think it made it harder for him to get respect the right way, so he turned to just killing people. He went from hating Atlantic City to not wanting to leave due to all the money he was making. Me growing up right outside of Atlantic City, everybody knew who Little Nicky was. And in the end, he died alone, far away from his home and family. no possessions. And eventually, after his passing, little Joey Merlino would start the new wars in South Philly over who would run the Philly mob. Uh, so that's the end of my spiel. We do have some time here. As you can see in all these graves, they're beautiful. The road right there, back there, is the Black Horse Pike. It wasn't hard at all to find Nicky Scarfo. Um, he was just the first row right off of the Black Horse Pike. So the Black Horse Pike is right there on the right of the screen, and then this is the first street in. But there's a lot of Italians over there, and a lot of beautiful ornate work. And for being on, there it is. There's your grave. So here's the thing. Nobody really knows where little Nicky is buried. They think he's buried here with his mom, his dad, his sister, um, and his son. Um, but his name's not on there. It could be because everybody knows little Nicky, and he made a lot of enemies, and just to keep the grave safe for his mother and father and sister and son that's in there, they probably didn't put his name on there, which is probably for the best. But that's it.